The seat that wasn't meant for hearth air inside the terminal was cold and full of whispers, as if everyone had something to say, but no one dared to speak too loudly. The long glass windows framed a wide view of the tarmac outside, where planes stood like giant sleeping birds. People in expensive suits and flowing dresses moved with quiet confidence, dragging designer luggage behind them like trophies of status. In the middle of all this quiet luxury, she stood small, quiet, and out of place. Her name was Lina. She was not from this country. Her accent, her clothes, even the way she looked around nervously made her stick out. Her headscarf was modest, her dress simple, and her worn brown suitcase looked like it had traveled a lifetime. She clutched her boarding pass with both hands, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. Her eyes darted between the gate screen and the people around her. No one smiled at her, not even the airline staff behind the counter. They just looked past her like she didn't belong. When the announcement came for first-class passengers to board, Lina stepped forward slowly, double-checking the letters on her boarding pass. It clearly said Seat 1. The man at the gate raised his eyebrow when he scanned her pass. This is for first class, he said, pausing. Lina nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Seat 1. I check it many times. He looked her up and down. His expression was tight, forced. Then he waved her through without another word. Behind her, she heard someone chuckle. A woman's voice followed, clear, sharp, amused. Oh, God. Maybe they're letting economy board first now to clean our shoes. Lina didn't turn around. Her face turned red, her heart thumping like a drum in her chest. She kept walking toward the plane, her back straight, her eyes forward, even as more laughter followed behind her. Inside the plane, the flight attendants were smiling, but their smiles tightened when they saw her. They greeted her politely, but she felt it, the shift in tone, the polite confusion, the subtle checking of her boarding pass again, the silent question in their eyes. Are you sure you're in the right cabin? Lina moved slowly through the cabin until she reached her seat. Seat 1. It was by the window, wide and luxurious, with more buttons than she knew what to do with. She sat down awkwardly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She tried not to touch anything. She had never flown like this before, never even dreamed of it. She had grown up in a small village where people walked hours to find a proper road. She didn't come from money. She came from struggle, dust, and deep kindness. Now she was surrounded by plush leather seats and cold champagne being offered on silver trays. As she sat down, a tall woman with red lipstick and a glittering watch stopped beside her seat. Her eyebrows rose the moment she saw Lina. Double quotes. Excuse me, the woman said sharply. I think you're in the wrong seat. Lina looked up, surprised. No, madam. This is my ticket. The woman gave a cold laugh. Oh, honey. They probably made a mistake. They do that sometimes. Let me see your boarding pass. Before Lina could say no, the woman reached out and grabbed the pass from her hand. She looked at it and her eyes narrowed, clearly irritated. Oh, I guess it really is your seat, the woman said, almost to herself. Then she handed it back with a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Enjoy. Lina smiled gently and whispered, thank you. The woman didn't respond. She walked away, muttering something under her breath to another man seated nearby. He looked at Lina and smirked. It wasn't a kind smirk. The flight attendants came back to offer drinks. One of them skipped Lina's seat without noticing. Or maybe she noticed and didn't care. Either way, Lina sat quietly, her throat dry, her stomach tight. She didn't complain. She never had. Life had taught her to accept things silently, to survive with patience. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Lina looked out the window and thought of him, her husband, the one who had surprised her with this ticket 2 nights ago. He had handed it to her quietly over dinner, with his warm smile and gentle voice. You've done so much for me, he had said. I want you to see the world in a way you never have. First class, just once, for you. She hadn't wanted it at first. She didn't like being the center of attention. But he insisted. And now, here she was, sitting in luxury, surrounded by people who looked at her like she was dirt on a white carpet. The man sitting in seat 1B leaned over suddenly. He wore a sharp blue suit and smelled like a forest of expensive cologne. His voice was slick with amusement. You sure you're not on a reality show or something? He asked. Like, is this a prank? Lina blinked. Sorry, he chuckled. Just saying. You don't exactly look like someone who belongs in first class. No offense. Lina smiled quietly. None taken. He waited for a reaction, maybe anger or a sharp comeback. When he got nothing, he leaned back with a shrug. All right, then. He said, let's see how long you last. Lina turned back to the window. The engines roared to life. The plane began to move. She felt a tear gather in the corner of her eye. But she didn't let it fall Dot instead. She whispered a small prayer to herself, Dot 1 row behind her. Another passenger watched everything with sharp eyes. He was older, quiet, dressed in simple clothes despite his first-class seat. He had seen enough in life to recognize what was happening. He had seen people with power, and he had seen people with grace. And sometimes they didn't come in the same body dot as the plane climbed into the sky. Lina's story was only just beginning, and none of them knew who she truly was. Not yet, because her husband wasn't just a kind man who gave her a ticket. He was the man who owned the very airline they were flying on Dot, and in just a few hours, when the truth came to light, everything would change. But for now, they laughed Dot, they mocked Dot, they whispered Dot, not knowing that every word would echo back to them. With the weight of regret, Dot whispers above the clouds. Plane soared high above the clouds, cutting through the sky like a silent arrow. But inside the cabin, the air was thick not with turbulence, but with judgment. It clung to Lina's skin like a second layer of clothing, invisible but heavy Dot every now and then. She could feel eyes on her, glancing, judging, whispering. Dot a man, with gray temples and a wristwatch that sparkled like crushed diamonds, leaned over to the lady beside him and murmured something while slightly tilting his head toward Lina. The woman covered her mouth as she laughed, her painted nails clinking against her champagne glass. Their laughter was soft, but not soft enough. Lina heard. She always heard, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her handbag and gently took out a photo, an old, slightly faded one. It was her wedding picture. Her dress had been plain. Her smile, shy. And beside her stood a tall man with strong arms and kind eyes. Adam, her husband. He was not born into riches. No, he had built everything from nothing. He had slept in borrowed apartments, walked to job interviews, been laughed at for his dreams. But he didn't stop. He had vision, hunger, and something more, gratitude. Even when he became one of the most powerful names in the aviation industry, he never forgot where he came from, or who stood by him when he had nothing. And now, Lina sat in seat 1A of an airline he built with his own hands. She looked down at the photo and whispered, "You told me to hold my head high. I'm trying." Meanwhile, the man in seat 1 billion, still amused by her presence, kept shifting in his seat. He sipped his drink, looked at her, then out the window, then back at her. "So," he said finally, "where are you from?" Lina looked at him, her voice soft but calm. "I come from a small village. It's not on most maps." He laughed. "And how'd you land this ticket? Win a contest?" She smiled gently. "My husband gave it to me." He raised his eyebrows. "Wow. Generous guy? Let me guess, he's some farmer who hit the lottery?" Lina didn't respond. Not because she was offended, but because she knew silence sometimes spoke louder than words. The man chuckled again, clearly enjoying himself. "I'm Michael, by the way. Senior Executive, Mergers and Acquisitions." Lina nodded kindly. "Nice to meet you." "You know," Michael continued, leaning in a little, "first class isn't just about money. It's about class. Some people have the money, but not the presence. You get what I'm saying?" Lina looked at him for a long moment, her eyes calm. "Presence comes from how you treat others, not from where you sit." Michael froze for a second. Then he gave a short, surprised laugh. "Well played." A few rows behind them, the same elderly man who had noticed her earlier was still watching. His name was Mr. Hayes, a retired diplomat who had traveled more than most men twice. His age, his eyes were sharp, but his heart was soft. And he had seen enough of the world to know that stories were never what they first appeared to be. He saw how the flight attendants skipped during the first drink service. He saw the way passengers leaned toward each other, whispering behind. Fake smiles. And he saw the way Lina never let her dignity slip during the meal service. It got worse that the woman across the aisle, a high-profile fashion editor, named Clara, looked at Lina's tray with open disgust. Do you even know what that is? Clara asked, pointing to the caviar. Lina looked at a small dish and nodded. Yes, I've tasted it before. Clara raised an eyebrow. Really? Where? On YouTube. A few nearby passengers laughed. Lina responded. Quietly. My husband brought it back from Paris once. You like surprises? Clara rolled her eyes. Of course he does. Lina didn't say another word. She slowly picked up her fork and tasted the dish, pretending not to notice the quiet. Snickering around her. At that moment, the intercom crackled to life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We hope you're enjoying your flight today. We'll be cruising at 35,000 feet. Our destination weather is clear, and we expect a smooth journey ahead. Thank you for flying with us. Lina closed her eyes. She imagined Adam sitting next to her, his hand over hers, whispering reassuring words. He had promised her this moment would be special, and she wanted to believe him, but it wasn't special. Not yet. It was humiliating. Still. She didn't complain. Not when her seat wasn't reclined properly. Not when the attendant poured her tea cold. Not even when a passenger accidentally dropped a magazine on her lap and offered no apology. She just smiled and wiped the pages clean. But deep inside, something had started to shift. Back on the ground, in an office far away from the clouds, Adam checked his phone. His assistant had just sent him a message. Your wife boarded successfully. Cabin crew confirmed she's seated. Adam smiled. But that smile faded when a second message popped up. Sir, there may be an issue. A few passengers are treating her... poorly. The crew is not intervening. Adam stood up immediately. He called the head of operations. Get me the senior manager of that flight, he said calmly. Now, the airline bore his name. It was his legacy, his pride. And the woman they were mistreating was his world. Inside the plane, Lina was unaware of the growing storm. The attendants finally brought her a warm tea. She thanked them, her voice still kind, still humble. Then, without warning, a child from economy slipped through the curtain and ran into first class. He was small, maybe 5 years old, with wide eyes and a gummy smile. Before anyone could stop him, he ran straight to Lina's seat and pointed. Auntie Lina. It was her nephew. Her sister's son. Lina's eyes widened. How did you? His mother rushed in behind him, embarrassed and breathless. I'm so sorry. He wanted to see you. He was too excited. Michael, Clara, and others stared in confusion. Lina bent down and hugged the child. I'll come visit you after the plane lands, all right? She whispered, brushing his hair back. Oh, okay. As her sister guided the boy back to economy, someone near the back asked loudly, Wait, you know someone in coach? Lina turned. I come from there. The voice answered, Of course you do. Laughter followed. The curtain closed. Mr. Hayes leaned forward now, his voice soft but firm. My dear, I don't mean to intrude, but you've been very graceful and very strong. Lina smiled faintly. Thank you, sir. May I ask what your husband does? Lina looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. He's in aviation. Before Mr. Hayes could say more, the lead flight attendant approached her suddenly. Her expression had changed. She now looked nervous. Ma'am, she said quickly, you've been requested to speak to someone important in the cockpit. The cabin grew quiet. Everyone looked up. The cockpit? Michael repeated, confused. Why her? Sir, please remain seated, the attendant replied. Lina stood slowly, unsure. Is something wrong? Not at all, the woman said quickly. Please come with me. Lina walked past the staring eyes and hushed voices, her steps unsure, her heart racing as the cockpit door opened and she stepped inside. The door closed gently behind her outside. The passengers leaned and craned their necks. Michael muttered, "What the hell is going on?" No one had the answer. But inside that cockpit, Lina was about to hear something that would change the course of the entire flight. And when she returned to her seat, no one on that plane would ever see her the same way again, the voice behind. The cockpit door closed behind Lina with a soft click, muting the hum of whispers that buzzed through the first-class cabin. The room ahead was dim but alive, blinking with dozens of lights, switches, and gauges. She stood at the threshold, uncertainly, her eyes scanning the narrow space. Two pilots sat at the controls, one of them turning slightly in his chair to acknowledge her. He smiled, not with the tight-lipped politeness she had seen in the cabin, but with warmth. Double quotes, Mrs. Khalid. He said gently, "Welcome. Please come." And she blinked, confused. You know my name?" The co-pilot turned to, nodding. "Yes, ma'am. We were informed before takeoff." Lina stepped forward slowly, holding her handbag tightly in front of her. "Why did you ask to see me?" The pilot gestured to a small jump seat beside the control panel. "Please have a seat. Captain Marshall will join us in just a moment." She hesitated but sat down quietly, her heart racing now. The view from the front of the plane was breathtaking. Endless blue sky stretched out before them like a sea of silk. Down below, the clouds moved like soft, slow waves. Before she could ask anything else, a small panel door opened behind the pilot's seat, and a tall man in uniform stepped in. His presence filled the cockpit, instantly calm, commanding, yet approachable. His dark jacket had a small gold pin near the collar. He held a tablet in one hand, but his eyes were focused only on her. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Lina Khalid. I'm Captain Marshall. It's an honor." She shook his hand cautiously, her voice soft. You asked for me?" He nodded. "Yes. I was instructed by Mr. Adam Khalid before the flight." Lina's eyes widened slightly. "He contacted you?" "Just before we left the runway," he said. "He wanted to ensure your flight was perfect." He also said, and I quote, "If anything happens to my wife, if anyone so much as frowns at her, I want to know." Lina felt her face flush. "Oh, he didn't have to do that." The captain smiled. "You may think that, but he doesn't agree. He cares deeply, and frankly, so do we. We didn't know you were on board until the final manifest was updated minutes before takeoff. We're sorry for any trouble in the cabin." Lina shook her head quickly. No, I don't want trouble. I just wanted to get to my destination quietly." The captain's voice grew more serious. "Your husband owns this airline, Mrs. Khalid. Your comfort is not a favor, it's our responsibility." She looked down, overwhelmed. The co-pilot gently added, "He built this company with his name and her name, Khalid Airways." The pilot chuckled softly. "And to be honest, most of the staff call you Madam Lina behind the scenes." Lina's eyes flickered up in surprise. "Really?" The captain nodded. "Yes, you're part of the legacy. And we want to honor that. Which brings us to something else." He turned the tablet around and showed her a message. It was an internal notification from the operations center. Subject: Passenger Treatment Report. Lina Khalid. Flight Ca 291 note. Observed behaviors of mockery and exclusion from multiple first passengers. Escalate immediately. Directives pending. She stared at the screen. The captain continued gently. The ground team received reports from a concerned crew member who noticed how some passengers were treating you. We're not ignoring it. We're handling it. Please, Lina whispered. I don't want anyone punished. Captain Marshall looked at her carefully. May I ask why not? She paused. Her voice trembled. Because if they are punished, they will only remember the consequences, not the lesson. His gaze softened. That's incredibly wise. She smiled faintly, though her hands trembled. I grew up around people who didn't have power. When they were humiliated, they stayed silent. And when they got power, they remembered, I don't want to carry that cycle forward. A long silence followed. The plane hummed steadily in the background. Then the captain leaned forward. May I offer a suggestion? Lina looked up. You return to your seat. Let us treat you with the respect you deserve. Let your presence teach them, not your silence. Lina took a deep breath. Yes, I can do that. Thank you, he said. And if you need anything at all, just press the button. We'll come ourselves if we have to. As she stood to leave, the co-pilot smiled again. Your husband is very lucky. I'm the lucky one, she replied gently. The captain opened the door for her and whispered as she stepped out, They're not ready. She gave a tiny nod. Her eyes calmed back in the cabin. The atmosphere shifted the moment Lina stepped back into view. Conversations halted. All eyes turned toward her. Even the faint clatter of cutlery on porcelain seemed to pause. She walked with quiet grace, never looking to either side. She moved past Michael, past Clara, past the silent flight attendants. Her presence now held weight, not because she had changed, but because they suddenly suspected she wasn't who they thought. She sat down again in seat. The new lead flight attendant appeared immediately with a fresh hot towel, a full meal tray, and a new glass of sparkling juice. Madam Khalid, she said softly, your meal has been re-prepared. Please let us know it's not to your liking. Michael leaned slightly toward her, now visibly uncomfortable. Wait, did she say Madam Khalid? Lina smiled at the attendant and took the tray without a word. Clara across the aisle was now whispering with her phone, slightly tilted toward her, searching something online. A few seats back. Mr. Hayes watched with quiet satisfaction. It took only minutes before the whispers started again. Different this time. Quieter, cautious. Is she someone important? Wait, I think her husband owns Khalid Airways? No way, are you serious? Check Google. There's a picture. Oh my God. By the time dessert was served, the entire cabin had shifted. Eyes that once laughed were now wide with discomfort. Lips that had mocked now stayed pressed tight. And Michael? He was sweating slightly now. He leaned over awkwardly. Hey, Lina, right? She looked at him politely. Yes? Listen. About earlier. I didn't mean anything. Just a little first-class banter, you know. Of course, she said kindly. I understand. He smiled in relief, not realizing the weight of her quiet strength was still pressing against his chest like gravity. At that moment, the intercom buzzed again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We'd like to thank you for flying with Khalid Airways. We also extend a very special welcome to Madam Lina Khalid, who is joining us today in seat 1. The cabin froze. Everyone looked at her. Her name, spoken clearly. Without apology. Michael's single quotes. Jaw dropped. Clara covered her mouth. One woman looked like she wanted to sink into her seat. Lina looked straight ahead. A tear formed in the corner of her eye. Not from pain this time, but from peace. After all the whispers and smirks and sideways glances, after being treated like a stain on a luxury fabric. Now they knew, and yet she didn't smile with pride because her dignity had never depended on their approval. As the crew brought her a handwritten note from the captain and a special dessert prepared mid-flight, she whispered softly under her breath, You were right, Adam. They needed to see me. In the seat behind her, Mr. Hayes leaned back with a quiet chuckle. He whispered to himself, What a woman. And then came a sharp, unexpected announcement over the speaker. Attention all passengers, we have a minor update. Due to a delay, at our arrival gate, we'll be circling for approximately 15 minutes. But that wasn't the part that made Lina's heart skip. What came next did. The flight attendant rushed down the aisle and stopped at Lina's seat. Madam, your husband, he's waiting for you at the airport. But he's not just waiting. She leaned closer and added in a whisper, He's bringing the media. Lina blinked. What? The woman nodded. He said it's time. Time they know who you are. Lina's heart raced. Outside the window. The clouds rolled slowly past. 15 minutes. 15 minutes until the world outside would meet her. But inside the plane, Those who had judged her would have to face her, one last time. Knowing who they had tried to belittle, the arrival they never saw, coming plane continued to circle gently above the city, its wings tilting ever so slightly as it coasted through. The evening sky, down below, the lights of the airport glimmered like stars stitched into the earth. Inside the first-class cabin, however, the mood had shifted from casual luxury to a tense stillness like the quiet just before a thunderstorm. Lina sat in her seat, her fingers resting lightly on the warm towel she had barely touched. She wasn't thinking about the meal or the captain's announcement, or even the weight of their stares. Her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. She thought about her village, about walking barefoot to school with her little brother, about her mother's hands rough from the fields, gently tucking her hair behind her ear before every exam, about the day she left everything she knew and followed Adam into a new life across borders, across fear, across hope. Her life had never been wrapped in silk or coated in gold. Her strength had never come from comfort. It had come from survival. And now, the very people who had mocked her moments ago were too stunned to look her in the eye. The lead flight attendant returned, this time with her head slightly bowed. She knelt beside Lina's seat and lowered her voice. Madam, MR, Khalid is already at the VIP terminal. Security has been increased. He's asked for full media coverage. Lina's eyes widened. He didn't tell me about that. The woman smiled apologetically. He insisted. Said the world needed to know the kind of woman who stood beside him from the beginning. Lina exhaled slowly. She didn't want the spotlight. She never had. But if Adam was making a statement, it wasn't just for her, it was for every woman like her. The quiet ones. The underestimated ones. The ones who were looked through. Not at Dot, she gave a small nod. Thank you. The attendant stood, hesitated, then added, also, Madam, I'm sorry for earlier. Lina gave her a gentle smile. Thank you for saying that. Behind her, Michael was staring straight ahead now, no longer smug, no longer amused. His fingers tapped nervously on his armrest. Clara, across the aisle, had folded her fashion magazine and tucked it away. Her posture was stiff, as if sitting still could erase the memory of her cruel words. Lina didn't need revenge. She had something far more powerful. Clarity. And the truth was about to land with him. The aircraft began its descent, the engines humming lower now. The seatbelt signs lit up. Outside, the runway lights grew larger, sharper. The cabin grew quiet, unnaturally quiet. Even the flight attendants moved with more caution, more respect as the plane touched down with a soft bump and rolled along the tarmac. A hush fell over the passengers. And then, through the large oval window beside Lina's seat, the first glimpsed. Rows of black cars lined the edge of the VA terminal. Red carpets stretched from the doorway to the planes. Stairs. Cameras. Reporters. Uniformed staff lined up in formation. And in the middle of it all Adam. He stood tall, dressed in a tailored gray suit, his expression calm and unreadable. But as the plane neared the final stop, his eyes locked with the cabin window. He was looking for her, and he found her. The moment their eyes met, something shifted in Lina's chest. Not pride, not shock. Something deeper, like a thread connecting her to the ground, pulling her gently back to where she belonged. The captain's voice returned over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your destination. We've arrived at our private terminal. Please remain seated as we prepare for a special disembarkation process. Thank you for choosing Khalid Airways. The flight attendant approached again, this time holding a formal announcement card. Madam, she said, bowing slightly, you are to disembark first. The ground crew is ready. Lina stood up slowly. The entire cabin turned toward her. For the first time. They didn't see a woman out of place. They saw power cloaked in humility. They saw strength dressed in simplicity. She turned slightly, scanning the faces that had stared at her with pity, suspicion, even disgust just hours before. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Michael looked down. Mr. Hayes met her eyes and gave a slow, respectful nod. She nodded back. As she walked toward the front, The cabin parted for her without a word. She stepped through the open aircraft door, the afternoon light pouring in around her like a spotlight. The stairs led down toward the crowd gathered below: media, photographers, employees in crisp uniforms, executives from the company she helped build quietly from behind the curtain. And at the foot of the stairs, Adam stood with a proud smile. When she reached the last step, he stepped forward, took her hand, and kissed it gently. "You did well," he whispered. "You carried yourself better than anyone else would have." Lina blinked back tears. "I didn't want this much attention." "I know," he said, "but they needed to see you." The cameras began flashing. Reporters stepped forward. "Madam Khalid, how does it feel to return to the airline your husband built? Did you expect such treatment from fellow first-class passengers? What do you want to say to those who doubted you?" She smiled kindly, but her voice was clear. "I want them to remember one thing. You never know who you're sitting beside. So choose kindness, always." Her words echoed across the terminal like a bell, clear and powerful. Behind her, passengers began disembarking. Slowly, Michael stepped out, paused, and looked at the cameras. Then his eyes fell on Lina again, and for the first time since takeoff, he looked genuinely remorseful. He walked forward and extended his hand. "I was wrong," he said softly. "You didn't just belong there. You redefined what it means to belong." Lina looked at his hand. Then, gently, she shook it. "Thank you," she said. Claire came next, her sunglasses now off. Her confidence cracked. "I judged you unfairly," she said, "and I'm sorry." Lina nodded. Apology accepted. As each passenger passed her, the mood shifted from arrogance to awe. One by one, they realized this wasn't just about wealth. It was about character. Adam placed a hand on her shoulder. "The media will want a few more shots, then we can leave." Lina leaned into him slightly. "I just want to go home." "And you will." He smiled. "But not before you make history." A reporter called out, "Mr. Khalid, is it true your wife inspired the first women's training program within your company?" He smiled and gestured to her. "You should ask her. She was the one who said, if you want to fly, give others wings too." The crowd murmured. Lina looked at them, all flashing bulbs, blinking cameras, curious faces. Then she spoke clearly. "I didn't want attention. I didn't ask for it, but I hope this story reaches someone who feels small, someone who's laughed at, someone who thinks they'll never be seen. You are seen. And your worth isn't decided by the seat you're given, but by how you carry yourself in it." The air around her stilled, not just because of the words, but because of the truths behind them. As the media took their final shots and the event wrapped up, Adam guided her into the black car waiting nearby. She leaned back into the seat, exhausted, her hand still wrapped in his. "Do you think they'll remember this?" she asked. He looked out the window, then back at her. "No one forgets the day they met a queen in disguise." And just as the car pulled away, another message came through on Adam's phone. "Sir, urgent update. Video footage of your wife's arrival is already viral across social media. Views are climbing rapidly. Public response is overwhelming." Adam turned the screen toward her. Lina read the first comment. "Whoever she is, she just taught the whole world a lesson in class." She looked out the window as the airport disappeared behind them, but in the sky above, another plane took off, and somewhere in seat one, another woman might be sitting quiet, kind, unsure of her worth. But now she had an example to follow. Echoes of humility. Black car moved quietly through the city, away from the glowing lights of the private terminal. Inside, the world seemed to slow down. The noise, the flashing cameras, the sudden rush of media attention, all of it felt distant now. In the back seat, Lina sat beside Adam, her hand still resting in his, her mind lost in a whirlwind of emotions she hadn't yet sorted. She leaned her head gently against the car window. Rain had started to fall, soft and scattered. The drops trailed down the glass like silent tears. Her reflection stared back at her, tired but steady, uncertain but not broken. Adam glanced at her, his voice low and careful. I didn't mean for it to get this big. Lina smiled faintly. You did what you thought was right. I just couldn't let them treat you that way and walk away as if nothing happened. She turned to him. I wasn't angry at him. Not even for a moment. I was hurt, yes, humiliated, a little. But mostly, I was just disappointed. Adam tightened his grip on her fingers. You've never asked for attention. But the world needed to see you, not the wealth, not the name. Just you, Lina nodded slowly. And now they have. But even as they drove through the city, the storm that began in the skies was now sweeping across the internet like wildfire. Within an hour, the video of Lina stepping off the plane had crossed 10 million views. Hashtags like hashtag Madam Lina, hashtag real class, and hashtag humility in heels began trending across platforms. News channels picked up the story. Talk shows began analyzing it. Blogs were writing about this simple woman who sat quietly in first class while being mocked, only to be revealed as the wife of the airline's founder. But amidst all the praise and viral fame, Lina remained silent. They reached their apartment, not a palace, but a beautiful, warm home built with love and simplicity. The guards opened the gate and the car pulled into the driveway. Adam stepped out first, opening the door for her. She took his hand, stepped into the rain, and for a moment just stood there. The sky wept gently above them, and she let it inside. Their home was quiet. The scent of jasmine candles lingered faintly in the hallway. Lina slipped off her shoes and walked toward the living room. She sat down on the couch and closed her eyes. Adam walked into the kitchen and returned with a steaming cup of tea, her favorite blend. With a touch of honey, drink this, he said softly, placing it in her hands. She took a sip and felt the warmth spread through her chest like a calming tide. Then Adam sat across from her and reached into his coat pocket. I want to show you something, he said, pulling out a letter. It was creased at the corners and slightly wrinkled, as if it had been handled often. Lina raised her eyebrows. What's that? A letter you wrote to me 10 years ago. Her eyes widened slightly. You kept that? Of course I did, he said. You wrote it the night before our wedding. You told me something I never forgot. He unfolded the letter and began reading softly. I know we will face challenges. I know some people will laugh at me, doubt me, ignore me. But I don't need the world to believe in me, Adam. I only need you to believe. And if you do, I will walk beside you with my head held high, no matter where life takes us. Double quotes, tears filled Lina's eyes. I remember writing that. Adam reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. And today, you live those words. But while they spoke in the quiet comfort of their home, the story outside was taking on a life of its own. One of the passengers from the flight, Mr. Hayes, posted a long message online. He described everything he witnessed, the mocking comments, the quiet dignity, the final reveal. His post went viral within hours. He ended his message with a sentence that would be quoted for weeks. Lina Khalid didn't rise above us because of who she married. She rose above because of who she already was. The next morning, Lina woke to a house full of messages. The doorbell rang with bouquet after bouquet of flowers sent from strangers. Handwritten notes poured in from young girls, from older women, from people who had never stepped foot in a plane, but had seen something of themselves in her. But one message stood out. It was from Clara, the fashion editor, who had mocked her. Over caviar. The envelope was handwritten. Inside was a short note. I misjudged you. You taught me something I should have known long ago. Thank you for your grace. Sincerely, Clara. Attached was a gift box. Inside it was a silk scarf, a soft blue, embroidered with the words, Dignity. Doesn't whisper, it shines. Lina folded the scarf gently in her lap. People change, she said quietly. Adam nodded. Because you showed them how. A few hours later, Lina received an unexpected phone call. The Minister for Women's Development was on the line. Madam Lina, the voice said respectfully, we've seen what you've done, how you carried yourself. We would be honored if you would speak at our upcoming National Leadership Forum for Women. Lina blinked. Me? Yes. Not as a celebrity, but as a woman of influence. Your story has already done more than 100 speeches ever could. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'll do it. Not because I want recognition, but because maybe it's time I stop hiding. News of her upcoming speech spread just as fast as the video had. Reporters started calling her the voice of quiet power when she stepped out again in public. People didn't rush to take selfies. They stood. And they clapped. A week after the flight. She walked into a large conference hall for the leadership forum. The stage was set, the lights dim, the room filled with hundreds of women, men, students, and media. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, the soft blue scarf tied around her shoulders. When she walked onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. But when she raised her hand gently, the room fell silent. Her voice was calm and steady. I'm not a leader. I'm not famous. I'm not even used to speaking into microphones, but I am a woman who has been underestimated. And I know many of you are too. She paused, scanning the room. We live in a world where your shoes, your accent, your seat number decide how people treat you, but that's not real power. Real power is walking through that judgment and still choosing kindness. Her words hung in the air like soft thunder. I didn't stand up on that plane. I didn't yell or demand. I simply stayed seated, quietly. And now the world is listening, not because I shouted, but because I stayed true. The audience sat, still, their eyes wide, some filled with tears. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here to remind you, you do not have to wear armor to be strong. You do not need permission to belong. She finished her speech with the same words she whispered on that flight. Your worth isn't decided by the seat you're given. It's decided by how you carry yourself in it. The entire hall stood to their feet, a standing ovation, but Lina didn't cry. Not until later, when she was back home, alone in her room, reading a letter sent by a teenage girl from a small town. Dear Madam Lina, they laugh at me because I come from a poor family. I wear old clothes, but when I saw your story, I realized maybe I don't have to change. Maybe I just have to believe. Lina pressed the letter to her heart and whispered, yes, believe. But while her world was now full of praise and recognition, something unexpected was still waiting on the horizon. Someone she hadn't seen in years, someone who didn't laugh at her, but had abandoned her long ago, someone who was about to return into her life with a question that would shake everything. The woman she never forgot world outside her window was quiet again. Weeks had passed since the flight that changed everything. The viral storm had settled, and Lina's life was slowly returning to the rhythm. She loved tea at sunrise, tending to her small indoor garden, reading handwritten letters from strangers who saw in her what they often forgot in themselves, yet something still tugged at her heart. Beneath the attention, the applause, and the speeches, there was a memory that hadn't left her, a face she hadn't seen in years, a voice that had once shaped her, then vanished like a shadow at dusk. Her mother. They hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, not because of anger, but because of silence, the painful, unanswered kind. Lina had left her village, young, chasing a life no one believed she could touch. Her mother had been stern, traditional, and full of fear. You dream too big, she used to say, and big dreams break small hearts. They had argued the day Lina left. Words had been said that neither of them knew how to take back. And so the distance grew. Now Lina sat in her quiet living room, a fire crackling gently in the hearth, the sky outside colored in fading orange. Then the doorbell rang. Adam was upstairs on a call, so she rose to answer it herself. When she opened the door, the world stopped moving. There, standing in the doorway, was an old woman with silver hair tied in a scarf. Her eyes dark and unsure. Lina single quotes breath caught in her throat. Mama. The woman didn't speak. She just stared at her daughter, as if she wasn't real. Her hands trembled slightly. Her eyes, filled with unshed tears, scanned every inch of Lina's face. You look different, the woman whispered. Lina single quotes S voice cracked. I waited so long to hear your voice again. Her mother nodded. I waited too. Too long? For a moment, neither moved. Then Lina stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. And all the years they lost fell to the ground like broken leaves die inside. They sat quietly at the dining table. Her mother's voice was thin with age, but every word carried weight. I saw you on the news. Everyone in our village did. We couldn't believe it at first. Lina smiled softly. I couldn't believe it either. Her mother looked down. When you left, I was afraid. Afraid you would fall. Afraid you would change too much. And when you succeeded, I thought maybe you wouldn't need me anymore. Lina reached across the table and took her hand. I always needed you. I just didn't know how to tell you. Her mother's voice cracked. I was wrong. So wrong? To doubt you. The whole world now knows your name. And all I can think of is how proud I am, how foolish I was to ever make you feel small. Tears slipped down Lina's cheeks. You weren't foolish. You were scared and I was too proud to come back. They sat in silence, holding hands across the wooden table. The room lit only by the fire and the setting sun. And Adam came downstairs. He paused when he saw the old woman, then smiled. You must be the one who made Lina strong. Her mother looked at him with soft eyes. No, I think she was always strong. I just forgot to tell her. Days passed. Then weeks. Lina's mother stayed with them, and their bond, once strained, became soft and whole again. They cooked together, shared stories, and walked through the garden hand in hand. But as peace settled into their home, a new opportunity arrived that tested Lina once more. A call came from a global women's rights foundation. They wanted to name Lina the official face of their new campaign, Quiet Power. They wanted her to travel, speak, inspire, and lead. Adam read the invitation with raised eyebrows. They're offering to fly you to 8 countries, keynote addresses, panels, interviews. Lina sat quietly. I never wanted fame. No, he said. But maybe this isn't about fame. Maybe it's about service. She thought for a long time. Then she said, I'll do it, but not as someone perfect. I'll do it as someone real. And so she went country after country, city after city. But she didn't arrive in luxury cars or wrapped in designer gowns. She wore her scarf. She spoke simply. She told her story without drama or bitterness. And people listened. Young girls stopped her in airports to hug her. Elderly women cried during her speeches. Men in boardrooms stood up when she entered, and everywhere she went, one message followed her. Your worth isn't decided by the seat you're given, but by how you carry yourself. In it, she became more than a viral story. She became a movement. And still, when she returned home after every trip, she was the same woman who sipped tea on her balcony, barefoot and quiet, a book in her lap. Then, one day, a letter came. It was from Michael, the executive who once mocked her in first class. It read, I've resigned from my company. Your story changed me. I've started a nonprofit to help train underprivileged women in business. I never thought someone like me could learn from someone like you. I was wrong. Thank you. Lina folded the letter and placed it in a box of memories beside her wedding photo and the note from the captain. She whispered, kindness echoes longer than cruelty ever can. Years passed. Her name faded from headlines, but never from hearts. People didn't remember what she wore or how she looked. They remembered how she made them feel. They remembered the woman who didn't yell back, who didn't shame her critics. They remembered the woman who was laughed at in first class, then walked off the plane with more grace than royalty. And in her final speech years later, in a crowded hall of world leaders, Lina stood tall in front of the podium and said one last thing before stepping away from the spotlight for good. Never let the world tell you where you belong. Walk in with your head high, not because you are better, but because you believe in your own quiet worth. And once you do, the world has no choice but to listen. The room stood in silence, not out of habit, but out of deep, unshakable respect. And as she walked off the stage, the lights dimmed behind her, but her message never faded.